Imagine being at the top of your game, playing in one of the biggest leagues in the world, earning millions, living the dream, and then risking all of it for a bet. That's the situation now unfolding in Major League Baseball, because two pitchers, Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz, have suddenly been placed on unpaid leave. Not injured, not traded, not resting, removed. And the reason? A growing investigation into possible gambling violations. Now here's what makes this serious. Gambling and professional sports have a complicated relationship. On one hand, betting is now more visible than ever. Advertisements, sponsorships, partnerships, it's everywhere. But for players, the rules are strict, because once a player becomes involved in gambling, especially in ways connected to the sport, it raises one dangerous possibility: influence. Influence over decisions, over performance, over outcomes. And that's something leagues cannot afford. That's why when concerns arise, the response is immediate. In this case, both players were placed on unpaid leave while the investigation continues. And that detail matters, because unpaid leave isn't just a precaution, it's a signal that the league sees this as serious enough to remove players from competition before a final conclusion is even reached. Now think about the risk involved. These aren't unknown players. These are professionals competing at the highest level. Players who understand the rules. Players who know what's at stake. So the question becomes, what exactly triggered this investigation? Was it betting activity? Associations? Patterns that raised red flags? At this stage, details remain limited. And that uncertainty is what fuels the tension. Because without clear answers, speculation fills the gap. Fans begin asking questions. What did they do? How serious is it? Could this lead to suspensions or worse? Because in baseball history, gambling scandals don't just fade away. They leave a mark, a permanent one. And now, with two active players at the center of an investigation, the situation is unfolding in real time. Careers are on pause. Reputations are at risk. And the league is watching closely. Because if the line between player and betting activity is crossed, the consequences don't just affect individuals. They affect the integrity of the entire game. And right now, no one knows exactly how far this story will go. The moment the news broke, it didn't stay contained. Because when two active players in Major League Baseball are placed on unpaid leave over a gambling investigation, it sends a message far beyond just their teams. It tells the entire league, this could happen to anyone. And that's where the ripple effect begins. For fans, the reaction is immediate: confusion, concern, and one uncomfortable question: can we trust what we're watching? Because gambling doesn't just raise questions about players. It raises questions about outcomes, intentions. Moments that once felt normal suddenly feel different. A pitch that misses its target. A decision that doesn't make sense. A sequence that feels just slightly off. Individually, those moments mean nothing. But in the shadow of a gambling investigation, they start to mean everything. And that's how trust begins to erode. Slowly, quietly, but powerfully. For players, the impact is even more direct. Because now every action is under a microscope. Not just performance, but behavior, associations, conversations. Because gambling investigations don't always focus on what happens on the field. They focus on what happens around it, who players interact with, what platforms they use, what patterns might exist behind the scenes. That level of scrutiny creates pressure, not just on those under investigation, but on everyone. Because in a league where betting is becoming more visible, the line between legal exposure and prohibited involvement becomes thinner. And that's where tension builds. Because players are now navigating a world where betting is promoted publicly, but restricted privately, accessible, but dangerous, visible everywhere, yet risky to engage with. That contradiction creates a fragile environment, one where mistakes, intentional or not, can have serious consequences. For teams, the situation is equally unsettling. Because when players are removed suddenly, it disrupts more than just lineups. It disrupts stability, planning, confidence within the organization. And beyond that, it raises a deeper concern. Is this isolated or part of something bigger? Because gambling-related issues rarely exist in isolation. They often involve networks, connections, patterns that extend beyond one or two individuals. And that's why this moment matters. Because the league isn't just dealing with two players. It's dealing with the possibility of a larger issue. One that could challenge how the sport manages integrity in an era where gambling is more present than ever before. Now, the focus shifts from what happened to what else might be uncovered. And in that uncertainty, the entire league feels the pressure. Gambling investigations don't begin with headlines. They begin quietly, with patterns, with data, with something that doesn't quite fit. In Major League Baseball, those patterns are constantly monitored because when money is involved, especially betting money, there's always a trail. And at some point, something in that trail triggered attention. It could have been unusual betting activity, unexpected patterns tied to specific games, or connections that raised internal concerns. Whatever the trigger was, it was enough to move things beyond observation and into investigation. Once that shift happens, everything changes, because now the focus becomes evidence. Investigators begin looking at multiple layers: betting data, transaction timing, associations between individuals, and most importantly, links between activity and performance. Because in gambling-related cases, the key question is never just, did someone bet? It's, did that activity influence the game? And that's where things become complex. Because proving influence isn't simple. It requires connections, clear, traceable links between behavior off the field and outcomes on it. That's why investigations like this take time. Because they're not just looking for mistakes. They're looking for intent, patterns that repeat, signals that align. And when those signals begin to connect, the situation escalates. For Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz, being placed on unpaid leave suggests one thing. The league believes the situation is serious enough to act before reaching a final conclusion. That's a critical point, because unpaid leave isn't a punishment. It's a precaution, a way to protect the integrity of the game while the investigation continues. But it also tells us something else. There's enough concern, enough uncertainty to justify removing players from competition entirely. Behind the scenes, the process continues. Information is reviewed. Connections are tested. Every detail is examined for consistency. And as that process unfolds, new questions emerge. Were others involved? Were there external connections? Is this part of a broader pattern or an isolated situation? Because once an investigation reaches this stage, it rarely stays contained. It expands, following leads wherever they go. And that's what makes this moment so critical. Because right now the story is still being written. The evidence is still being analyzed. And the outcome is still uncertain. But one thing is already clear. This isn't just about what's been discovered. It's about what might still be uncovered. When players are placed on unpaid leave, it's more than a pause. It's a warning, a moment where everything stops, and the weight of what's happening becomes real. For Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz, that moment has already arrived. No games, no appearances, no normal routine, just uncertainty. Because in Major League Baseball, gambling-related investigations carry a different level of seriousness. Not just because of the rules, but because of history. Baseball has lived through the consequences of gambling before, and those moments left permanent scars on the sport. That's why the league responds quickly, and why the consequences can be severe. Now, even without a final ruling, the impact is already unfolding. Careers are on hold. Reputations are under pressure, and every day that passes without clarity adds to the tension, because uncertainty is its own kind of consequence. For players, time matters. Momentum matters. Consistency matters. And when all of that is interrupted, it changes everything. Teams are forced to adjust. Lineups shift. Roles change. Plans are rewritten in real time. And beyond the technical impact, there's a psychological one, because teammates are watching, coaches are watching, the entire league is watching, trying to understand what this means, not just for these players, but for the system as a whole. And then there's the public, fans, media. Speculation grows with every update. Questions become louder. What happened? How serious is it? What comes next? Because in cases like this, perception moves faster than facts. And once a player's name is connected to a gambling investigation, it's difficult to separate reputation from reality. That's the risk, even before a conclusion is reached. Because outcomes can vary. If no violation is found, the players return. But the questions don't disappear completely. If violations are confirmed, the consequences can escalate quickly. Suspensions, long-term bans, even permanent damage to a career. And that's what makes this moment so critical, because it sits right at the edge of two possibilities: recovery or fallout. And right now, no one knows which direction this story will take. But one thing is certain: the outcome won't just define this case. It will send a message to every player in the league, where the line is and what happens when you get too close to it. In the end, this story isn't just about two players. It's about a line that exists in every professional sport, but becomes more dangerous as the world around it changes. Because in Major League Baseball, that line has never been more tested. Gambling is no longer hidden. It's everywhere, on screens, in advertisements, integrated into the way fans experience the game. And yet, for players, the rules remain clear. Stay away, because once that line is crossed, the consequences can be irreversible. For Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz, the outcome is still unknown. The investigation continues. The evidence is still being examined, and the final decision hasn't been made. But the impact? That's already happening, because situations like this don't just affect individuals. They reshape perception. They force leagues to adapt, to strengthen policies, to reinforce boundaries between players and the betting world that surround them. And they send a message, not just to players, but to everyone involved in the sport. Because the risk isn't always obvious. It doesn't always look like corruption. Sometimes it starts small: a connection, a decision, an action that seems insignificant in the moment. But over time, those small moments can build into something much larger. Something that threatens not just a career, but the integrity of the game itself. That's why this story matters. Not because we know everything that happened, but because we don't. Because the uncertainty forces a deeper question. How close is too close? In a world where gambling is becoming more visible, more accepted, more integrated into sports culture, that question becomes harder to answer. And that's the challenge leagues now face. Not just enforcing rules, but navigating a landscape where exposure is constant, where temptation is always present, and where one decision can change everything. For fans, the hope is simple: that the game remains real, unscripted, untouched, because at its core, sport is built on belief. Belief that what you're watching matters, that outcomes are earned, that competition is genuine. And when that belief is tested, everything else is at risk. That's the true weight of this moment. Not just what happens next, but what it represents. Because in the end, this isn't just about gambling. It's about trust. And once that's on the line, everything else follows.